We'll call the meeting to order at 10:03.
All right. Do we have anybody from the public here that
Then we got two gentlemen, Ted and Matt, both with Bayview. Looks like a third individual is coming in. I assume they're here for item 6A. So unless they wish to make some comments, just a preamble an hour and a half before that item hits. Otherwise,
all right, then
Ted, Matt, if you guys are open to that, we can save any conversations and comments until item 6A.
Yeah, happy to wait till 6A.
Okay.
Looking forward to the interim part.
And then can I just get a name for the role attendance sheet on who's listed under the Bayview Development Group?
I would assume that's Caleb Cater. Caleb, C-A-T-E-R is the last name.
I'm sorry, what was the last name?
C-A-T-E-R.
Okay. All right.
okay, consent calendar. We have the minutes from the past couple of meetings here. Everybody's had a chance to look at that. We're okay proceeding.
Yeah, I make the motion to approve.
They're on consent, so I don't think we have to do the
Okay.
motion. So
Just need a,
we're okay. We're good.
all in favor? Yep, I'll get
Yep.
good. It's everyone.
All right. Arian, you want to go through our financial and activity report?
Yep. Let me just grab my paperwork here. I'll go ahead and share screen. I think the easiest way is to show the financial page and then walk through a little narration. Go ahead and stop me at any time for any. Can you see? Let's see. Can you see this?
We can.
Okay. So looking at 2021 actuals, obviously impacted by the pandemic. Our revenues for the year were 7.1 million. 5.5 of that was from off-street lots and garages. 1.5 of that from parking meters. Obviously the parking meters were only the downtown core meters, with none of the peripheral meters turned on until later in 21. Just in comparison to our last full year, not impacted by COVID, would have been 18-19. That revenue number was 19.4 million in total. So pretty sizable hit there. Interesting to note, I took a look at the off-street revenue side of things. The 5.4 million was comprised of 75% of that was from monthly parking. Only 25% was from visitors to downtown.
Surprised it's even 25% was visitors. So okay.
Yeah, and some of that obviously could have been borne by the 90 minutes of free parking that we're giving. A lot of short trips, just because of the activity that we were seeing. No larger drivers, conventions, theater events, arena, all that stuff that drives kind of some of those longer stays. We did infuse the operating fund with 5.7 million from the capital reserves. In terms of expenses, were 9.7 million here. Some of the savings, that was 87% of the total budgeted. There were some savings due to staff vacancies on the city side, about $200,000 there, and a little over $1 million in our contractual side of things, mostly from our parking operator, as we worked closely with them on staffing models to kind of get us through this pandemic period, while maintaining like a core group of managers and supervisors. And the contractual services also includes our security team, which we kept on throughout the pandemic period. Transfers, as always, kind of what's budgeted is what ends up happening. So little under $900,000 in transfers, most of it to the general fund there, debt service, PBID, and the Downtown Association. We did transfer some to the capital fund, $750. Kind of a weird way the budget works in that we had programmed that in advance before identifying the take from the capital fund. So I guess we could have made this 5 million and made this 0, but it's just how it shakes out. So our total expenditures 11.2 million. Net change was a positive 1.5 million. Ending fund balance just under 5 million after the reserve holds there. Any questions on kind of this high level look here before I kind of take it over to the capital side? If not, we can take a look at the capital for 2021. So let's see, just real quick on the downtown event dynamic message signs. This is a project that's effectively now, as we're ahead of this timeline, this project's done. We should see this line come off in our future looks at this stuff. These are the signs off of the freeway off ramps, 87 at Santa Clara, Julian, and some other areas in and around the arena and Diridon area that they replace those signs. That's done. Garage elevator upgrades. Public Works is still evaluating and bringing on consultants to develop a plan of attack on several of our facilities elevators and upgrades that might be necessary on those. So we still have this money earmarked and carry that forward to the next year to have it available to us. The garage facade project at the Market Street Garage, just a little bit of monies expended there for the work to get that going with Public Works is in the final stages of developing their demolition plan to take off the existing tile, the failing tile facade, and then preparing it for the conceptual artwork project that we've presented in the past. This downtown wayfinding project is, I think, monies that were set aside. To be honest, I don't know that any work has been completed on this. This is not a project by the parking team. This is a project from another DOT team that they encumbered some monies for a conceptual downtown wayfinding, walking, biking, mapping system of downtown. To be honest, I don't know exactly where that project stands in actually being completed. Greater downtown parking inventory. This is the money set aside for Diridon Arena area parking development, specifically on 2 sites, the Milligan site and the Lot E site. So work continues on design, land acquisition, and consultant work to get those projects moving forward. Nothing in our green tech program. Minor facility improvements. This is where we undertake most of our small minor projects throughout our facilities. Spent about 500,000 in that. We're carrying this 1.6 million that was remaining at the end of the year. We then transferred into our reserves, knowing that the Arena Diridon capital numbers were going to need to be bolstered in the future years, because that's where we were taking a lot of the money to bolster the operating side. So as we had that unspent monies, we put that 1.6 million back. Revenue control upgrades. This is one where we've got all this money encumbered on the parking control system in our garages. Still working on that vendor to close out that project, working through punch list and testing of that system now, in the hopes that we can close out that project here before the end of this fiscal year for sure, hopefully just into the early part of 22. That'll take out that line will start to diminish as we cut checks against that project. security improvements. This money is being set aside for improvements and upgrades and replacement of our garage camera systems. The city's purchasing team is undertaking a citywide approach to this. So everything from police and fire stations to city hall, libraries, community centers, and everybody's going to be included in one large RFP or proposal for services. So the city's purchasing team is finalizing that project. So we've got money set aside for our piece of that when that goes forward, and we'll be working on that probably this coming year. Public art and citywide overhead. Public art is tied to some expenditures. I think in the downtown, illuminating downtown was a project that they spent some monies on, and then some of the other smaller public art projects around downtown, specifically one at 3rd Street Garage, and there was one at the Convention Center Garage on the exterior that spent some of those monies. As we look at the kind of detail by facility, if you've taken a look, if you have any questions, I'm not going to really walk through each of these sites, but open to any questions or comments. This is the
Most of the expenses are prorated. They're not specific to the garages. Is that correct?
correct. Most of these in this are just an allocation of a percentage based on some metrics generated years ago on size, scope of the garage, much of it on the revenue that was generated by that garage, and how much of the overall expenditures could they bear. So it's a generic look at some of the revenue is specific, but from the expense side, no.
Is there any expenses that you can attribute specifically to garages? That's of
Yes.
significance. That's of
Yes,
significance.
yeah, contractual expenses from our operator, for example, we can. That's the most detailed. Obviously, supplies or materials and stuff like that, if we ever make any large things. Payroll is city payroll. That one is also allocated. So it's really the contractual services, I think, is the biggest one that does get more granularly parsed out based on actuals. But the others are actually, I think utilities and rent and insurance, I think, is also more granularly put together. Like, for example, this number 564,000 at Alma and Waz is not representative of just an allocation. We pay a large sum of monies for the rent of that site.
What
Aaron,
about
can I just quickly say, I'd like to thank you for adding my percentages.
Yes. And
Acknowledge.
not a problem. Thank you.
what about deferred maintenance, Aaron? Is there a link here? I'm just trying to get a correlation between revenues, and then most of this is peanut buttered expenses, so it's not overly meaningful. But is there something deferred maintenance wise that would be interesting to compare to the revenue versus the number of spots?
I think for is it the next item? No, the item 5C, when we look at, or no, the 5-year 5D I've generated. I mean, it's more relevant to the conversation later, but this is a report that highlights some of the projects that we're likely to undertake, because you had asked for some details on, well, what are some big projects you guys are going to undertake in the future. So this was an attempt to throw together some details on items that we're looking to put together, but not so relevant to 2021, more forward-looking.
Well, that's kind of what deferred maintenance is about. It just, you're looking at this thing and saying, do we have any cash cows, or do we have any dogs here that we should be aware of? Yeah,
I mean, this is an attempt. I mean, in a general year, it does a better job without all the red at the bottom of capturing the revenues, certainly, and to a lesser extent, the expenditures on the on the detail side. I don't know that there's a better way for us to really do it when the bulk of the expenditures from the city side of things is my time isn't parsed out by location that I visit, and Elias's time isn't parsed out by meter
No,
dispatch.
and it shouldn't be. Where I'm going is like Almaden was, right? You know, it's the big money loser here. And how do we, you know, is there a way to fix that? Is there, you know?
Yeah, because Almaden Waz would normally bring in, you know, $2 million or something, I think, in a normal year. And so it just had zero revenue because there was nothing happening. So honestly, this year is not a great report, admittedly, you know.
It's not a good year to go after as well.
Yeah.
As your base, I get it.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks, sorry.
Yep. So that really kind of concludes the look at 2021. I think we'll have more info as we go through 21-22. Things are looking up in 21-22. Certainly be under, you know, historical base, but we're making strides, and we think we're going to be making some adjustments in our budget at a mid-year to actually bump the numbers up, because we were a little conservative, I think, in our outlook for revenue. So unless there's any, yes.
Oh, would you do me a favor? In the future annual statements, can you please have a breakout on off-street totals by district?
Off-street, you mean on-street?
Or yeah, and anything that's the meters.
Yes,
They
that would be
were
the-
a category.
That would be the
one-
on-street, and then each year we're going to have it here in another item or two.
Oh, the on-street.
We have the meter broken down in this separate report that we're going to share with you. Actually,
Okay.
item 5B is the meter report. So this is a recommended approval item. So unless there's any questions or comments, we can.
We got a motion to accept the report, approve the report.
I'll second.
I don't know if I had a
motion to
first.
approve.
I didn't have
Okay.
a first.
Okay,
I
so
motion to
we'll
approve.
from and then okay, and then David. All right.
Before we move on to take the vote, Arian, I think you have somebody, I'm not sure who it is, a member of the public. I see a hand up.
Oh, yeah, Paul Soto.
Paul, did you have a comment on this item?
Yes, I did. Good morning. My name is Paul Soto. I'm from the Horseshoe. The comment that I have is related to the assumption that we need to reduce the amount of parking spaces. That this is just assumed. That has not gone through any kind of process. There's no kind of democratic process. There's no kind of protocol that the public has been challenged to engage in order to determine whether or not we want that or not. I think that we're kind of moving away from democracy, and we're getting very close to totalitarianism. And I mean that like specifically, because totalitarianism is just simply one governing body stating that they know best and they're going to do what they're going to do, like it or not. And if you don't like it, well, then you can just leave. And so
Paul, excuse me.
I have 2 minutes?
Well, we had a public comment earlier. If this is your public comment, let us vote on this measure, because your comments are not relative to this discussion item. And then I'm happy to go back to the public comment and have you finish your minute or so that you have left. If you're okay with that, Paul. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments on this particular 5A? We got the
Was all
motion.
in favor? Did I have any against that? I think it was 6-0. Okay.
All right, so back to Paul here. Paul, if you'd like to finish up your comment.
Okay, all right, thank you. Well, it's just that there has been no democratic process that has been engaged. It's just, oh, well, developers say that it's going to cost this much for us to create a parking space, and so it's more economically beneficial to the developer not to do that. So we're just going to make it very convenient for them, but there's no democratic process to that decision. You see, and this is what I'm talking about. They're very fundamental principles that are of democracy that are not being applied. They're simply being assumed. And because of that, it's creating a lot of confusion, a lot of sense of entitlement, and a sense of having people like me that when we push on it, because we know what we're looking at, that when we push on it, we are seen as somebody that is being disruptive, that is just somehow or another just disgruntled and just doesn't like it. When
Okay, Paul, you have 15 seconds, please.
Thank you. When it's nothing of the sort. What it is that all of these basic assumptions are a mockery. They mock democracy. And we need to start engaging in a democratic process within the context of those decisions.
Thank you,
All
Paul,
right.
for your comments. Thank you. Arian, you want to go on to 5B here, the
Yep.
smart meter?
Yep. 5B.
5B, I'm sorry, did I say 4B? 5B.
And I think Elias will provide the overview. I will share the screen of the memo.
Thank you, Arian.
Can you see the memo here, everyone?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. So this memo addresses 3 items. One is the expansion revenue and cost recovery. And we've been monitoring this for 3 years now. 2, the single space meter revenue update for fiscal year 2021. And 3 is the revenue outlook for fiscal year 21-22. We started this year with the carryover related to the cost recovery of $139,000. That means this amount still need to be recovered from the cost of the expansion. As you know, the meters were discontinued, were put on pause in all exterior areas, and only started in August of 2020 in SoFa and downtown. So obviously we didn't generate, or we generate almost no revenue in the exterior. If you look at the table in the memo, you will see that the first column has the 2021 revenue in each of the areas. And we have the historical base, which we typically in the previous years, we subtracted the historical base from the revenue for that year, and we added up to a positive number. But this year, with almost no revenue generated in those areas, we ended up with a negative balance. The other thing is that even SoFa, which was on since August, didn't generate enough revenue to match or exceed the historical base that was used to calculate the gross revenue. And so all the numbers that followed on the table are really in the red because of that severe impact of the pandemic on our revenues. We also tried here in this table this time to illustrate that even the downtown core with the meters on for almost the whole year still didn't meet its historical base and is in the red. The good thing, which I'm gonna talk now about the.
Well, Elias,
yeah.
I'm not sure I follow the chart. So I
Okay,
understand
so let me go
revenue column and
by
historic column, but
Correct.
the gross revenue is the delta between those two, right?
Okay,
So
the
I
delta.
understand the math of the chart, but I'm
So
not
the
sure the
logic-
rest of it is additive.
Okay, so the logic behind the delta in the chart is that when we did the expansion, we increased the rate from $1 to $2. So we are supposed by council direction to take the excess revenue from the historic base and apply that potentially for a meter district balance, which is the subject of the next item on the agenda. So typically, we will get a positive number there that is applied to cover the cost of the expansion, and whatever left over will be in the last column, which is the net revenue that will be considered for meter district.
Still
This
not
is
sure
the
what-
same. Yeah, this is the same. If you are familiar with the last year's memo, this is the same calculation that we're doing like we did last year. This time, of
Maybe I missed it
course,
last year, Elias, but
yeah.
So help me, because I don't understand it. I'm not sure if others on the board here understand as well. So we had 1.2 million in the downtown core, and I assume that 0.2, that's additive to the 1.2?
No, this is the downtown core revenue at the bottom is what we generated this year in the downtown core from single space meters. It's 1.2 million. The historic base for the downtown core was 2 million.
No, I can read the chart. I understand that. I'm used to why isn't there a total of 1.4 for San Jose?
Because this chart was meant only to address the recovery cost of the expansion, and we just put the downtown core at the bottom just to give you additional information. But it is not part of the calculation for the expansion. The expansion was only for the exterior area, and that was the object of this chart, is to address the exterior area expansion and the sofa included in it. So it's not, and that happened in 17-18, right? Downtown core expansion happened 2013.
Okay, so someone else speak up because I am thoroughly confused. I'm not sure.
I'll take a run at it.
Please, David.
So I think what you're saying, the first question, the earlier chart that Arian went over had off-street total parking of 1,575. And if you add up these two numbers, they're 1,423 and change. So there's a difference of about 150,000. Any idea why?
We are only here addressing the single space meter revenue and not all of the multi-space meter revenue.
So it's not, so there's single space offsite revenue and multi-space offsite revenue.
Correct.
Oh, okay, good to know. And really, this is an exercise when you come to that 139,127, you're saying, hey, a long time ago, we spent a whole bunch of money and we still have to somehow pay for the 139,000 that we have not recovered from that project that was done a long time ago in order to end up to zero with that project.
Correct, correct.
And
We were
where did the
expecting
139,000 come from?
from,
General
That
parking revenues.
correct, from the additional revenue. Remember, when we expanded the revenue, when we
Okay, so-
expanded the meters,
Right,
we changed the rate from $1 to $2.
right.
We were
So it's
supposed
the
to
delta
take
of the dollar is the point.
exactly
Okay.
and apply it to the
last
cost.
Right. And so the last column is the only one. How is that? That's the gross revenue plus the annual ongoing cost, and that's the totals?
Correct.
Yes. Okay. Charlie, does that help at all?
Partially. So let me feed it back. So we have $139,000 of IOUs out there from past years.
From
All
the
right.
initial capital
Right, doesn't
expansion
matter.
cost.
And we have $91,000 of ongoing current year, and I'll assume every year, expenses. All right, so $240,000 worth of expense we need to recover against the 198 of revenue we had. The historical is interesting, but I don't see how that's relevant here at all, other than to say we had a real bad year.
Well, the
Let me take,
historical, yeah.
I'll
go
take a
ahead.
stab at the historical revenue. So the historical revenue was established when we, based on pre-expansion revenues. And the city set up the reserves saying that that historical revenue has to be made and put into the parking fund because it covers other things that, other expenses. So things like the collection of the meters, the meter shop. There are other expenses that have to be covered that aren't outlined specifically in the chart. So the historical base revenue makes the city whole on what we were making pre-expansion. Then we expanded and we increased the revenue. It is that revenue increase, that dollar increase, that is now eligible to be put into reserves. But that money has to also cover the capital outlay costs and the additional ongoing new expenses that the smart meters charge annually. So we have to make revenues, then we have to take the historical base and put it in the parking fund to cover other expenses and whatnot. That gives us the gross revenue that's available for us to then pay any capital outlay costs that are still existing. Any additional monthly costs that the smart meters charge that we didn't used to have because our crank meters didn't have connection and whatnot. And then what's left over is the net, which is eligible to be put into the parking district area reserves. In this case, it's demonstrating we are very much in the hole for this year. Does that make a little bit more sense? That historical revenue has to be there because it's part of the structure of how we calculate the reserves per council direction and approval. Did that help?
It does, but this is a subset of what Arian just went through on the previous chart.
Correct. We have off-street revenues, which is parking lots and garages. And then we have on-street revenues, which are meters. And then that on-street revenue is divided a little bit further into single safe meters. So all the smart meters throughout the downtown core and then in the exterior. And then we have multi-space and special event meters. So those are meters that are kind of over by Convention Center, down by the SAP. Those meters are event driven and have rates that fluctuate based on the event and go much higher than our $2 basic meter fee in the downtown and exterior. So those are not included in here.
That's why I wanted to see the breakdown on the prior chart, because we used to have breakdowns by the lots in Willow Glen, how much they used to cost, even for the maintenance for lots that were not in the downtown periphery. We had lots in Alum Rock, Willow Glen that you guys were monitoring. I'd like to see a breakdown from not only the meter districts per meter district, but the off-street lots and where they're at.
That's above. Arian went over that.
Yes, and you don't have that. I asked for that like months ago. And you said it was difficult to get the breakdown by districts on an annual basis, let alone a quarterly basis. I asked about that about 2 meetings ago.
I'm sorry.
Am I on mute? Am I on mute?
No, you're good.
Okay, 'cause
You were.
my screen shows that I'm still on mute. The item 5A outlines the revenue and expense for those sites.
No, I want it broken down for the more like it used to be, where it had it by Alum Rock lot, the Willow Glen lot. I used to see how much
does.
each.
Right here. Lincoln is Willow Glen. Alum
Arian, you
Rock.
need to change the screen.
Oh,
Arian, you need to change the screen.
my mistake. Sorry.
I think we broke the code.
I'm
Okay.
conflating both the lots and the district. Yeah, we do have them by the my bad, on the lot.
Okay, you're good.
But I do want to see it, but I do want to see it by district on the meters.
It's right here.
This is by district.
On this one, but in the other chart too. Can you please add them back so it's in, like, we have the
It's
breakdown?
never been in that chart.
I know that. That's why I specifically asked, can you please add it so we have a sense of the, like, because David was great in adding the percentages. I love the fact that that's that breakdown of the whole. You know what I mean? I would like to see it in context for the entire parking inventory. Not on a separate agenda item, please. I would love to see it in that chart.
We'll take a look.
We can take a look at it. It's two very distinct programs, and that's why they're separate, but we can look at it and see what we can.
We undertake this effort once a year to give this report, which does break it out. And they're just two separate items. But let's see what we can do.
Thank you.
All right. So is there an action that needs to be taken on this?
This is an approval item, yes.
So we're just accepting the report is what we're doing.
Yep. Mhm.
Do I have a motion?
Motion.
Seconded.
All right, seconded by David here. Any other discussion
was
on
Wolfram.
this particular issue? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. Thank you, guys. Paul, do you have a comment on this particular issue, or because your 2 minutes have been used up here? You're welcome to use the chat.
Well, I have a comment on basically every single system that is
Paul, Paul, that's what your 2 minute public comment is for. You're welcome to use the chat. You're welcome to use email to write in your comments and your questions, and we're happy to address those. All right, but
Okay.
we can't go every comment here.
But
So,
yet this,
Arian,
this
if
is
you
city
go to
business, though, right?
5C, the capital improvement project update, please.
Can you see this? Am I still sharing
You're
screen?
just gonna dismiss me like that?
It's,
No, I gave you multiple options, Paul.
Elias
No,
is still
You
sharing.
didn't give me multiple options. This is city business that is being
Paul,
conducted.
let me be clear. All right. You have 2 minutes of public comment.
Correct.
Okay, I gave that to you. All right, we listened to your comment. I gave you the ability to use the chat feature. I gave you the ability to email to
No, you
me or
didn't
to
give
this
those to
group.
me. Those are mine to have. This is a democracy. Getting back to reinforcing the point that I made earlier, you're not giving me anything.
All right,
These are the rights that I have as a citizen.
Paul,
So you're not
Paul,
you're not
you're
not giving me-
disrupting the business that's at hand.
well, democracy is disruptive by its nature.
So Paul, you're going to force me to mute you on here. You're welcome to use these other
No, that's
features.
your choice. I'm not going to force you to do nothing. If you choose to do that, then you can choose to do that. But I'll extend the
So
courtesy.
Arian, we need to move on. If as
And
the
I'll
host
put
of the
the mute
meeting,
on,
if we
and-
have a disruptive, then we have to.
Yeah, I'm having a
You have to
difficulty.
what?
My Zoom is frozen right now, and am I still sharing screen? That's why I keep asking.
Now we're
Mine is
on
showing.
the Hollywood Squares here, so.
Okay,
You're
am
not
no
sharing a
longer-
screen. You're not
No,
sharing
you are
a screen.
just, I see all the pictures of the attendance.
Okay, and I don't have the ability. I might have to jump out and jump back in to see if it comes back for me. Let me do that.
Can you hand off the meeting?
I
It doesn't, doesn't
hope
kill
so.
it?
Well, I can share the screen here if you guys want.
I can't see any faces. Mine's completely,
Oh, there we see your desktop. Whose is that?
This is Charlie's
Oh,
desktop.
okay.
Okay, but Aaron, you got the CIP project update here now.
okay, sure.
All right, so I'll flip the pages for you as we go.
All right, flying blind 5C. So this is a look at 21-22 year-to-date CIP, somewhat convoluted spreadsheet here. We have the far left column proposed 21-22 budget, the 2.9 million. The next column over represents carryover monies from 2021, which totaled 5.7 million with the breakout.
Charlie, did you mean to share the screen, Charlie?
We just see your desktop. We don't see the actual document.
Oh,
If you have
really?
two monitors, we're just seeing the other monitor.
I thought that I had shared it, but did that work?
Yes.
Perfect.
Okay, so now everybody can see it.
Yep, we're good. Go.
All right, sorry, everyone, technical difficulties. So I was saying proposed 21-22 left column totals 2.9 million with the breakout by project. The next column over is our carryovers of unspent monies from 2021, which totaled 5.7 million. Again, identified by project. Then there were spring budget moves. 2021 moved over to 21-22, totaling another 4.5 million for a total modified budget for 21-22 of $13 million. So that's what we effectively had for this fiscal year, 21-22 for our projects. Then in this year, we've effectively identified that we're not going to spend all of this money. And given the fact that we're not going to undertake some of the projects that we might have identified or we were over budgeted, we transferred monies to our reserves of 1.6 million. So it finally leaves us with a budget. Oh, I'm sorry. Budgeted over, rebudgeted savings from the prior year totaled 1.6 million, totaling 4.8 million. The far right column is identifying the project expenditures to date with some notes totaling 5.9 million. As you can see, the vast majority of that again is our parking control system, which is in monies that we've encumbered this year and haven't actually spent many checks against it. So that is our current look at 21-22. Very, very minimal projects undertaken this year. It's very difficult for us to significantly spend monies this year. We've got staffing shortages within our own team, and working on significant projects has been a challenge. But I think as we move into this next year on the next item, for the 5-year, we have some minor projects, which was that table that I had shared briefly. And now I don't know that I'll be able to share that going into the next item. Let's see. What else could I add to this? I know it's a fairly convoluted chart of starting a year, moving monies from one year to the next, savings monies moving forward. But in totality, we have 14.8 million. We've spent, quote unquote, either spent and or encumbered about 6 million. With some large chunks of money in our garage facade improvement project, which is going to be a multi-year project, as you can see from the bullets there on the far right. We don't even anticipate bid and award until later in 2022, construction in 23, and kind of close out of that project in late 23. So that's going to be on our books for many years. Hopefully we start to finalize the revenue control project, the 5.6 million And then garage elevator expenses, we've got 2.5 million. Public Works is finalizing their game plan to bid and contract out some elevator repair projects across the portfolio.
So Arian, thank you. My question or two on this is, so the 14, 15 million is what's in the budget. That's going to roll forward if you don't spend it this year. You've spent so far 6 million, right? As you said.
Yeah.
Is there any on the revenue control items, right? The budget's 5.6, you spent 5.3.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any chance that these things go over? And so that would be the surprise spending.
No, I don't anticipate any overages for these. Anything over would require, some council action in order to add funding to some of these things. I don't anticipate anything. The revenue control is a contractual item. I don't foresee anything there. The only things like elevators, for example, we've got 2.5. If the consultants in Public Works identify the projects and then start to bid them and it comes back at something higher, then we would need additional monies. But depending on timing, I think next year, if I'm not mistaken, we've got 500,000 in there. So then starting next year, we'd have 3 million.
Right.
So maybe we're good unless there's something massive that we're unaware of, where we'd have to kind of then in a year effectively say, well, instead of 500,000 for elevators, we need 1 million. But I think as we go through, we're being pretty prudent in starting to scrape away any overages that we might have and putting them back in reserves because of what we've taken. But I don't foresee any overages at this point. And we're not undertaking any massive projects.
Any other discussion on
Quick question. Arian, I care about EV charging stations more than most.
Sure.
So for $200,000, how many do you get?
Oh God,
I'll guess.
well, and to add to that, what's the revenue stream that's behind that $200,000 investment? How do we recoup that $200,000 by charging?
There isn't. There isn't a revenue stream. The revenue stream from vehicle charging is meant to be a break even. So we charge electricity charges for a charging that basically net to the output and the R&M of the devices. So it's supposed to be a net zero to the city. So if we spend 200,000, it's just to invigorate the EV system, not necessarily to generate money. We might generate parking money, but unfortunately, currently we have a EV permit program which provides free parking. We're looking at that going forward as maybe changing that program up to actually charge for parking in addition to any charging for the electric vehicle.
Can we put that on a future meeting, discussion?
We already have it identified as a topic, I think, for our next meeting, to be honest.
Okay.
So maybe we'll get it next time, but how many do you get for 200,000? What do they cost?
Just
Just
it all
guess.
depends. 20, let's
20.
say.
About 10
I'm
grand a
just-
piece. That sounds
Just
right to me.
speculating between the device and the electrical conduit runs and everything else.
Thank you.
All right.
5D. Are you able to share that one, Charlie? Unfortunately, I'm still flying blind over here. And unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to share this Excel table, but I'll try and.
Arian,
narrate
can
it.
you email it to me,
Sure.
your table, and I can try to share it?
I'm just pulling it from the website, right?
Yeah,
So-
he had a special
I had an extra table that I put together.
color coded
Bonus item, okay.
bonus item to try to help illustrate.
I have no idea what suddenly happened to my. All right, Heather, it's going to come to you in just a second.
This is why we need to meet in person, in my opinion.
Well, is there a reason we're not meeting in person?
Well, we literally as a team just got back to City Hall this week. Honestly, I don't know if there's any rules at City Hall about,
I think,
mass
Arian, I think there was an email that we continue to do those
Yeah.
public meetings through Zoom.
okay.
It's a direction, not like our
Councilmember
choice.
Morales here. We have maintained the virtual meetings for commissions still. And the only in-person meetings are the council meetings that we have on Tuesdays. We don't even have our committee meetings in person. We're still doing those virtually as well.
Thank you, Councilmember.
Thank you.
So because I can't see, Charlie, are you sharing 5D? I'll try to
I
breeze
am,
through this
I
one.
believe I am.
Okay. So this is the first kind of presentation to the DPB. We've done it for the last at least year, maybe two, where we acknowledge that, after the holidays in early 2022, we're going to start preparing the next year's 5-year budget. We've historically said, for us, these are pretty far out looking unless we have any large projects identified for some of these out years where we would augment numbers to identify a big spend. Because the last item I already identified things like elevators, like the facade project, like our parks project, where we've got 5, 3 million, 2.5 million tied up in those. We're not showing any large project expenditures in any of the out years. So to use Charlie's favorite word, it's just kind of peanut butter spread across the next 5 years. You have all seen this, and this is what is included in our current 5 year. So our current 5 year would include 21, 22, and then each of these 4 columns, 22, 23, 23, 24, 24, 25, and 25, 26. What we're now showing you is that, hey, we're going to start embarking on our next 5 year. It may very well look just like our current 5 year, with the exception that we need to add a 5th year, 26, 27. What are we going to put there? Well, from our perspective right now, as it stands, we would probably spread the peanut butter 1 year further and just carry these numbers out because we don't have anything earmarked, but we need to put something in for future years. That said, the spreadsheet that I just sent over to Heather, Charlie, and Heather, if you're able to, let me know.
I have it up. I'm ready.
Okay.
Charlie wants to.
Heather, the screen is yours.
All right. I have the con.
And so Heather, you can maybe just start at the top of that to be completed chart and just slowly
Okay.
scroll.
Can you
So
all
these
see?
these are projects identified by a consultant that we had a year just before COVID. We got the report that identified a list of repair projects that the city should consider undertaking. They were listed in A, B, and C categories. And if you keep going, Heather, all the way down to that kind of summary table, we undertook and completed the A items. The A items were the urgent items that needed to be addressed, that had significant safety issues or were impending hazards to the facility. The category B and C items are: B were moderate importance. They would be good to undertake as they will increase the service life of a structure. And then category C are more aesthetic or functional that the city may wish to address. So when we look at the total of outstanding items that need to be touched, are roughly 1.4 million, 1.37 million, with just about $1 million in category B and 400,000 in category C. So we will undertake those, and those will fall into our minor parking facility improvement projects. So as you can see, we have monies currently in our current budget, 21-22, and we will have currently budgeted 1.75 million for every year out, currently budgeted. So we have enough bandwidth to address all of the regular and ongoing minor projects that come up throughout any given year, but as well as enough funding to tackle these projects on an ongoing basis. And they're everything from bird abatement, painting, power washing, minor things like that. The biggest ones are call outs to do drainage improvements in some facilities and concrete sealer and membranes, which put a coating on the concrete, in many cases on the rooftop decks of the garages, or in some of our interior spaces where cars are coming off the street wet and can penetrate the concrete. So that's the largest out of the 1.4 million. A little over $1 million is called out in the drainage and concrete sealers. So we need to bid those projects and move forward. And we would attack those in our minor facility improvement line. So this is an opportunity. If the board has any opinions on our approach in terms of the far-reaching years, particularly the 26, 27 year. Like I said, we're not currently identifying any large-scale projects that we would want to put several $1 million or anything large that we couldn't cover either in these numbers here or in any minor carryovers from year to year.
Arian, what do you need us to do on this one? This is all just for our information.
This
here?
is just information. Again, I think over the years, the board had articulated that they wanted to see the capital side of things and how we were conceptualizing these. And so we started bringing not just here's what we've done, but here's what we plan to do in some future years. And we've done that over the time, and we've shown bigger things like facade projects, like parks spending $5-6 million projects. Right now, we're basically saying we're in a holding pattern. We're in a maintenance program at best as we go forward. And the 2.9 million that we're showing with some money spread across various things, most of it in our kind of facility improvement maintenance line, is what we'll do going forward.
Okay. We move on to 6A.
Yes.
Heather, are you
6A.
sharing or do you want me to share?
Is everybody there?
We are.
Okay. 6A. So the memo outlines and summarizes the prior PowerPoint presentation on the same item back in September, where our team is conceptualizing a parking permit program that establishes some criterion by which staff evaluates requests for long-term parking agreements. And it is the same detail in there in terms of priority of conceptually, existing projects or properties down to low level initial proposed, terms of eligibility in terms of number of permits based on the square footage and how many permits or how many spaces a property may have on site, up to 1.5. And then anything that has on-site parking above 1.5 would not be eligible. Term lengths conceptually at 5 and 10 years for existing or proposed projects. Some conceptual rates around hold periods and active periods. And then the conceptual number of permits that we put into the basket, if you will, for the program. And the concept of global use permits that would afford folks parking in downtown, not necessarily geared to any one specific facility. So what we're seeking is staff plans to bring this to council later, well, probably not later this calendar year, but after the new year at some point, as we kind of flush this out, but want to get your feedback and get an opinion from the board. And I know there's several members of the public that are here.
Yeah, so let's start out with the board. If anybody on the board has comments, questions on this.
I have a question. Do you think that a fixed annual increase of 3.5% gives you guys enough flexibility if for inflation increases or anything that might exceed the 3.5%?
The bullet above it is the higher of market rate or something. So if for some reason our market rate were to jump above what that 3.5% increase, so it's, let's say you're at $100 and the increase would take you to 103.50, but our market rate jumps to 110. Well, the rate is 110. And then that year the next year would add another 3.5%. If market still stays at 110, that contractual rate would be 114, whatever.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
I have a question.
Sure.
Why is this so different from the recent Moxie project?
Why is it so different?
Yeah.
It's our attempt to basically put together a set of criteria. I don't know that the Moxie project would have been I don't know that the Moxie is our gold standard of the agreement types that we want to sign going forward. Obviously, we're not looking to necessarily, I mean, first and foremost, we're looking at commercial property under this, office buildings specifically, mostly under this program. So it wouldn't necessarily even be tied to a hotel development.
Yeah, Aaron, if I could chime in, this is Councilmember Morales. The Moxie project is actually part of the impetus of what spurred, I think, some of this discussion. Definitely is not the gold standard, and in fact, having something that was much more fair and not just on a one-off basis where, you know, a project could come in, you know, and just by sheer timing, they come in and are able to snag spots. Something that was much more fair across the board was what I was also interested as well. And so that there, you know, that's the reason is it's meant to look different than what we've had before in an attempt to be much more fair in the availability of the limited parking spaces that we have.
I appreciate that. There's certain items in here that probably need a lot of discussion. The one that I find interesting is the whole period being reduced to 2 years. I mean, I've been in the development business a long time, and 2 years goes really fast, and you might not even be halfway through completion of the project.
Yeah, I'd say we're open to discussions around what that could look like. Again, this is conceptual at this point. We don't want speculative. I mean, we've signed deals in the past where and many deals where we're not actually charging on anything, but there's large holds. I've got several that are reaching their, you know, some of their term maximums, and we haven't seen anything moving on those. So I think we're open to what that could look like, and maybe putting in some milestone triggers that a development has to hit in order to maintain the agreement or the active status of an agreement. With something like that, I'm far from an expert in what those triggers could be, permitting or different, you know, entitlement milestones. But
well, you can have, I mean, there's a number of steps in the process. I mean,
well, do you have, I mean, does anybody have, you know, some idea around a number of years, let's say, and then some triggers within those years that say, if this is hit at this point and this point and this point, let's say that number is, if the whole period's 4 years, then do we get to a point where, okay, well, within the first 24 months, something has to happen? Or does the city just sign up a bunch of these deals? Because every time we sign one of these, we've got this, I call it kind of an outstanding liability, to where it impedes our ability to actually help those that may actually use it on that day.
Well,
so,
there are a number of steps that you
well, of course there are.
could consider. One is the planning approvals, which, you know, in some cases, you know, go 9 months. Then there's the building permit process, which might have 3 rounds of comments and go for 6 to 9 months. And then I guess the next step would be breaking ground, and what would be the period for breaking ground. And from there, the developer can say, or there can be an agreement on an additional 2 years.
Yeah, so I mean, did you say the planning approval 6 to 9 months, the building permit approval 6 months?
Building approval could be 6 to 9 months also, Aaron.
Yeah, okay. So I mean,
And then-
in there, you're not a whole lot over the 2-year time limit. And again, I know that there's extenuating circumstances and these things could drag on. It's just how much appetite do we as a city have to drag that process on?
But this falls into completion of construction to allow an active period.
Yep. Well,
So-
again, and we're talking, there's kind of 2 tracks here, right? There's you're just talking specifically about a project that needs to come out of the dirt. And then this program is also meant to serve existing properties. And in those cases, so maybe it needs to have kind of 2 arms, one for existing properties that are just trying to lease space and they have a shorter hold period because it's just their marketing that they need to get going. And then the development side might need a little longer runway.
I agree with that, yes.
Okay.
So
How did
Aaron,
the 2,000 permits available under this program, how long would that take to issue that many permits based on the strength
It's
of
just-
developments that's proposed downtown?
And I can't answer that. It's all dependent on who comes to the table. I mean, there's quite a few existing properties that have permits in just that individual tenants are holding, and they may wish to kind of own their own destiny, if you will, and buy permits and then allocate to their tenant base. And then there's proposed projects that may be eligible in some capacity. Some may not if they're proposing to build their own parking on site. The 2,000 permit number was, we did some analysis on how many parkers did we have pre-pandemic, and then how many available spaces did we have throughout the portfolio at kind of peak times on a weekday business day, and how many permits do we think we could issue to take us up as pretty close to 100% during that time. And that's how we came to that number.
Then my last item is the global access permit.
Mm-hmm.
I guess the issue is, where am I going to park? Am I going to park, you know, 5 blocks from my office, or I'm going to be maybe 1 block?
So, yeah, this is probably the hardest one for some folks to grasp in San Jose. If somebody told you could park within 3-4 blocks of your building in San Francisco, nobody would bat an eye. But in San Jose, I know we're challenged from a perception standpoint, but we're effectively telling you, you would have a parking spot in downtown in one of really 4 core garages. And I think very quickly folks would start to naturally go to the spot where they know they could get a parking space. If you show up at 8 o'clock in the morning, I'm pretty sure you're going to kind of get your preferred site. If you show up at 11, well, might get a little dicey. Admittedly, we have some ways to go in order to make this a perfect reality in terms of messaging through our dynamic signage boards throughout downtown. There's 13 of them that we're replacing. So we will be able to articulate what sites have spaces. We hope to be able to post this information online and through navigating sites to show people where the spaces are available in real time. And so that's how we need to get there in order to make this successful.
Thank you, Aaron.
Aaron, do you ever put into the fold the other 2 city garages that you guys have that are not public garages, but they're for employees? I'm assuming right now those garages are massively underparked. And so they're not necessarily needed in the community because everything else is underparked. But if there is a work from home or future of work discussion at the city, do those garages ever come into play?
I mean, I can't see you because my screen's down, but I would say, Arian Collin, parking guy, wants to maximize the usage of all of our sites. So I would say yes. There's a hurdle, admittedly, with, just like I'm sure you deal with at San Jose State and all of the union requirements and everything else, to get through on the employee parking side of things. But currently, interesting enough, our employee base at City Hall already deals with this to a certain degree. They're not guaranteed parking in what we call the employee garage between 4th and 5th Streets, north of Santa Clara there, just on the other side of the Miro project. If they show up and that garage is full, they have to go to another garage, to our 3rd Street garage, which is 2 blocks over. So that already happens today, and it's happened for several years. And folks start to learn that at certain peak times, that garage fills up and they go to the overflow.
Yeah, because obviously we deal with this at San Jose State all the time. And both of us have a predominant 9 to 5, parking crunch. You can debate the hour or 2 on either side of that, but evenings, there's no one in our spots.
Yep.
And just figuring out how to better utilize those spaces.
Well, the employee garage is free on nights and weekends, so it is available to the public on those non-utilized times already. Not only is it available, but it's free.
Okay, I was not aware of that, so thank
Yep.
you for that. All right, what's our, so Ted, do you want to jump in here, any comment?
Sure, happy to, thank you. And I'll try to keep it in that 2-minute range. We have a lot of thoughts on it, but I'll try to be as concise as I can. So really three topics here. One is the global access, the hold period, and the lease period. And by the way, I'm appreciative of the challenge that the city has to try to strike a balance here between a lot of different users, folks who would, want to potentially utilize it. But I'll put forward our position. For the global access, that's the topic you were just touching on. I don't think employees generally would be open to the idea of having to park at any one of 4 places. I realize over time, the city employees, for example, have found some balance there, but when you're doing that across multiple potential employers downtown, I think employees would find that very challenging, unpredictable distances, along with certain public safety issues, depending on which lot they would be required to park in. So by extension, employers would be less likely to lease downtown as a result. And what that does is that's going to prevent developers. I don't think I could convince investors or bankers to sign up for this program. So it would, well, I think it would have a pretty severe effect on new development. The hold period, as board member Cord mentioned, 2 years would really be unworkable for development. And again, the suggestion that was made to split it between existing versus development projects, that makes good sense. And it's probably worth unpacking that. And we would have specific thoughts on that if anyone was interested. And then the lease period, the Moxie lease period with the tenant extensions, again, on development deals, that would be fairly critical given what commercial leases, if it's primarily focused on commercial leases and trying to drive office into downtown. Something beyond that would probably be requisite. I get the intention here and why this is going on. It feels a little bit too early for where San Jose is at today. San Francisco and San Jose are different places. I guess our proposal would be for now to leave the Moxie precedent kind of as a framework on the development side in place. They had a 5-year hold, 10-year lease, and then some extensions. And I guess I would put to you that had this program been in place for that hotel application, and I think it's analogous enough to the office, they would probably not have been able to get entitlement and proceed. I don't think it would have worked for them. And it certainly would eliminate what we currently have going through entitlement if we were required to proceed on this, which is why we're so interested. It would essentially take the project we're proposing near City Hall, the new one, off the table. We would have to go back and redesign. We had designed around the Moxie precedent and some conversations we'd had with the city over a year ago. So that's essentially it.
Thank you, Ted. Is there other comment on this issue?
Charlie,
David?
could I ask just a couple of, so this is our last bite of this apple, is that correct?
I believe so. I think we intend to try and march forward with a council memo in the coming months.
Before our next meeting, most likely, or this is our last bite of the apple is the question, and the answer is yes.
Yes.
I got a couple of quick comments. The first one is congratulations on crafting a very complicated thing. And I don't mean complicated in a bad way, because this is a terribly difficult issue with pros and cons for me. I have a small business downtown, and if my customers can't come, I'm in big trouble. And if my employees can't park in the garage nearest where they live, given the hours that our business is open, I'm in big trouble. But on the other hand, having people like Ted and others and build projects is critical to the future of the city, which I support completely. So trying to find that balance, I think you guys have done a half decent job of doing that. So congratulations to you for that. One quick question. If I have an employee right now who parks in the market garage and has a pass, does anything change for those existing people?
I don't want to say no, but we haven't fully, vetted. I think we're going to end up having options, and it very well may spread to these agreements in some way. Based on pricing, you may have an option to just park at one garage. It's going to be likely some premium above and beyond something else, but we would like to see a larger number of people have global access, which provides us flexibility. But I would always have some ability, I think, for folks to, which we have right now. The Market Street garage already has regular parking, premium parking, which is parking on the second level closest to San Pedro Street, and we have reserve parking. So there's already 3 flavors. So I'm envisioning that we would always have 3 flavors and a 4th flavor called global. And so now it's incumbent on us to kind of put that all together in the package when it comes to just our month-to-month folks.
So you said you don't know, or you're not sure. So I was hoping for a yes or no.
Well, I don't want to say nothing's going to happen. I'd say, could somebody pay and just park at Market Street Garage? Yes. Will it continue to always be $125? No.
Well, I wasn't asking the price. I was asking whether it was still, nothing's changing
Yes.
for the people who have the existing tickets, existing parking option for the garage that they've already purchased maybe a year ago or 5 years ago or even longer. That's not part of this plan to change.
Correct. I think that eventually they will have a decision to make in terms of the pricing that they want to pay.
Right.
And is it the existing pricing which gets you global access, or is it a premium price, which gets you one location?
Ah, okay. So the rate might go up if you want to just be at one garage.
Yes, because we have to factor that in as we make,
Got it.
operational decisions.
I've never seen the actual, have we ever seen the actual Moxie terms? I'm not sure. I'm sure they're in the public arena somewhere. I've never seen them. I mean, supposedly they have 35 years or something like that total. And I don't know how many spaces or how long or anything else, or I don't know how to resolve.
I'd be
that.
happy to send you a copy of it.
Thank you. Well, this is our last bite of the apple right now, but be curious. And then we've gotten to the point where there's about 6,000 spaces downtown, and we know that some of them are already allocated to specific uses, like the Marriott and the St. Clair, and the other in the convention center, and then some for Deanza and I guess Moxie and the Market Garage. So there's something short of 6,000 spaces, closer to 5. And then we're going to be allocating 2,000 of our 5,000 spaces into this program, essentially in perpetuity.
Just real quick, we don't speak in spaces, we speak in permits. So we're not allocating spaces to this program, we're allocating permits.
Okay. And as you explained to me, if there's 5,000 spaces, there's probably the ability to go to 7,000 or 8,000 permits because everybody doesn't go all the time.
Or maybe even more based on utilization. Yep.
Right. Except to the extent that my customer comes and they just want to come and park there. How many spaces are we reserving for the customers in this program, I guess, is what I'm kind of asking.
Yeah, we got to find that balance at every facility. Where's the equilibrium of being able to accommodate our visitors, because they are equally as important to us to be able to accommodate. And that's the challenge in the game that we're always playing on. How many can we facilitate? I mean, we know historically how many visitors are in our garage at any given time based on the hourly metrics that we have. And so we take that into consideration when we develop how many permits can we issue.
Right. I prefer you call them customers than visitors, but that's fine.
Okay.
So I don't have any other comments other than, again, I'll go back to the beginning, which is I think you've done a great job of crafting something here. I don't know how the development community gets financing unless they have certainty about being able to deliver the certainty to their financing entity, and whatever you have to do that. Otherwise, the program isn't really going to do anything. But can we put a stake in the ground and say this will never be more than 2,000? Because we're not going to be building any more garages. I don't need an answer to that question, but thank you for letting me provide some input.
And I think the 2,000 is an up to 2,000 number as we move forward. We would give likely the director of DOT the discretion as occupancies increase to dial that back, I would assume.
Okay, that's a change to what is printed in front of us, Eric. So if number 5 on this chart would say up to 2,000 permits, I think that's a little softer. Henry, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I did. I do believe this should come back to the board before it goes to city council. And there should be a time for further outreach and further comments. And time for staff to look at some changes that I think need to be made.
Our next meeting is in March. I don't want to, this is the second time you guys have seen it. I think we've got another half hour. I'm open to continuing to discuss this on comments that you guys might have. If we end up taking it to council.
Did I miss a meeting? I don't recall this.
Yep, September. Yeah, I think you were there.
We didn't have this memo then.
You didn't have a memo, you had a PowerPoint presentation of the same information.
And that was the TDM also.
No, that was the October meeting.
All righty. dementia. But my recommendation is deferral.
Deferred at the September meeting, and that's why we're here now. So, I mean, ultimately, I can talk within DOT on, if we're going to intend to move forward with putting together the council memo in advance of a March timeline, or if we want to circle back.
Yeah, let us know.
Well, I hate to say this, but we just had a special meeting in October. So, maybe that's a way to go, but I'm not pushing for that.
I guess I'm, unless
Well, I think
Heather
what
or
Arian's
anybody
looking
else
for,
wants to.
Henry, is where's your pause? Where's your concern? Is it?
Well, we've talked about the whole period. We've talked about the global access. We've talked about extensions. I want to see what's going to be in staff's final memo, and I might agree with it, but I want to see it. Now, if that's just an FYI item, I don't know, that's fine, but I would prefer that it come back, that the reiteration of the proposal come back to the board so we can see it again.
So let me take a little liberty here, Henry. So if staff took this memo that they sent to us here, right? And other than changing under number 5, where it says up to 2,000 permits, and this is the substance of what the memo that goes to council.
And Charlie, just to jump in, I think there's some merit to looking at a kind of two-pronged or two-armed approach in terms of existing property and new development in terms of a hold period. I think that has some legs to say, if the city really wants to make this work for new development, then maybe that needs to be a little longer. And so I think that's on my notes to take back internally and chew on and put together some options there.
So I'm having a hard time threading this one because, I understand Henry's concern that he wants to make sure, and I think all of us, he speaks for all of us on that, what we talked about here or what we approve here, if that's what's going to the council, then we're obviously, if we approve it, we're okay with it. But if something's going to the council that we haven't yet seen, and it's being attributed to this board, that's a miss.
How about this?
Yeah.
How about I suggest in your recommendation, you outline those couple of things that we just talked about, the up to 2,000 permits, the staff moving forward with segregating out existing development or existing properties in development and 2 tracks for hold periods, term lengths, etc. And then you put those into your recommendation and you are in support, you approve or put your support behind the memo. And then if we, in drafting our memo, come up and against anything that is a substantial change, then we bring it back to the board for further discussion. If this memo stays within the kind of current guidelines that are established and there is no major change, we move forward with going to council with your support for the permit program.
I think that speaks to what Henry's issue was.
Is that acceptable? I don't foresee us changing outside of those items that we just talked about, massaging those. I don't see us making any other major impactful changes to what we have outlined here. If there are, I think we would want to come back. Like I said, I don't anticipate that there will be, but if we don't have that kind of timeline moving forward, our next meeting here for DPB is in March. That means we wouldn't get to council until probably next fiscal year. I mean, it would push it too far. I know that there are developers and there are customers that are looking for agreements, and we won't ink a deal until we've got this ironed out. So we don't want to start kind of backing that process up as well. So would you be comfortable, Henry, with that approach?
If that's what I have to settle for, then so be it. Yeah.
Yeah, anything
I've
significant,
said what
either
my
we,
preference is, but you know, if that's what the board wants to do, I'm fine.
and Heather, if there's something of significance, maybe we don't have to wait till March. And since we could set up something as a, one agenda item meeting.
Sure, that's an option. I'd like to stay away from it because we're getting into, Thanksgiving and Christmas and New Year's holidays, but that's absolutely an option. If it's important enough to bring back and we can't wait, maybe we could convene.
Yeah, and I would be fine with that too, going that route. And if there's any kind of significant change, set up a separate meeting for that.
May want to make a motion?
I think we're at that point. So
Can I
David,
ask one more quick question?
Yeah.
On 3, the active parking term length, existing property up to 5, proposed under construction up to 10. Is there any guaranteed extensions in that language or thought process that you're having?
Currently, no, but I think that would be another one that you could conceive potentially. But I mean, you start looking at beyond 10 years. Honestly, I would say no. Beyond 10 years, you start getting into these, perpetuity, multiple extensions of 10 years.
Right. I'm just asking. I'm just wondering if Sarah, or if it's appropriate, Ted could comment on whether that's sufficient to finance a project. If Sarah's still there, maybe she could.
We have to also ask our question as to whether or not the city is intending to be the backstop on projects' financeability. I don't know that that was the intent behind these programs.
Well, I thought that was the whole intent of the program, was to get these projects built and provide them with help.
I think they're meant to be an option, but not the sole option. I mean, on-site building is always an option.
Arian, if I can chime in, there's Councilman Prowse. That is absolutely not the intent of the program. The program is not set up to try and help spur development at all. The program is to manage a city-owned asset, which is parking garages, that is not meant for any one entity. It's not meant for developers. It's not meant for just customers. It's not meant for employees. It's meant for everybody that is in need of parking in the downtown core. And as Arian just stated, and this was my concern with the hotel project, we as the city are not and should not be the backstop of parking for new development. New development has many different opportunities. Number one, being developed on site. Number two, there are other parking garages and opportunities that people can actually tap into if they wanted to, private resources. Number three is changing, obviously, their understanding of how many parking they may need. And then we are also an option, which would be city-owned garages, but we are not the backstop, and this is not the program for that. This is actually the opposite. Again, I think that hotel project was the impetus for me to try and really get something that was much more equitable. Luckily, DOT was already working and looking at something, but for me, it's really about how do you make that most fair for everybody that has a need for parking across the board, that's a consideration, but it's absolutely not the intent of the program.
very good. Sarah, were you going to comment on this, or David asked if you had a comment?
Yeah, I see all sides of the argument, right? And I agree with and understand what Raul's saying. I think that there's not a one size fits all, right? There's always going to be extenuating circumstances. There's always going to be a difference in development timeframe and entitlement timeframe. So what you have to try to do, I think, which is the tough job that Arian has, is try to get something that's going to help the largest number of people in a reasonable way, right? Like, I don't know a ton of the specifics about Bayview's deal for the hotel that they're talking about. So I don't know about the time frame and what was promised to them or not. But I just think it's a really hard ask to be able to try to make or assume that the city is going to take care of everybody's parking requirements.
Right. Okay. Thank you, Sarah. Scott?
Thank you. Arian has got a really tough job here to try to balance all of this out. And I just want to remind the board that we have a number of B and C buildings that have no parking at all. And every single surface parking lot in the downtown is a development site. And I just keep thinking about the BART proposal on the Victory parking lot in the 325 spaces that there's no accommodation at all for any other public parking there. A number of the older buildings, the historic buildings that were built with zero parking, rely on all of these spaces. And I think about how we backstop with our public facilities and balancing that all out. And if you've got a J. Paul request for 900 spaces, and then there's no more room at the end for whether it's the remodeling of some of the Santa Clara properties that Bayview's looking at, or just our building right now, which parks across the street on the Victory lot, when that gets taken down for the BART construction, and we're going to be in the queue for parking at the Market Street garage, and there's no room at the end, what happens to the viability of these buildings? So I just want to add that on as another more difficult layer as we're wrestling this issue to the ground.
Thank you, Scott. Entertain a motion.
Well, I'll do it if nobody else will. I think based on the idea that you got to get this going, I think it's time for us to make a decision. And based on Henry's comments that we should have another bite of the apple if there's something material that's changed. I think that we should, this is a tough one, but I think we should go ahead and move forward with this, because otherwise, we're going to have Moxie 2 and Moxie 3 and Moxie 4. So maybe don't add that to the memo, the motion. So I'll stop.
Okay, so your motion is to move this forward with the caveats that we had talked about, a couple changes, and if there's significance, that we set up a separate one agenda or so item meeting to re-review it.
Yes, thank you for clarifying me.
Just making sure. All right. Do I got a second on that?
I'll second it, Charlie.
Thank you. Any further last discussion on the motion?
Nope, I got it. Just a vote, all in favor, or if it's easier, anybody opposed?
Aye.
I'll vote aye. I don't know what else to do.
Shouldn't be this hard. So 6 in favor. Am I correct?
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
Good discussion, guys. Thank you. All right, we're up to 6B.
All right, Aaron, I'm assuming you still are
I'm still just
still in the operating in the dark there.
Yeah.
I will pull this memo up and share. Let's see. Make sure that that is the right one. Okay, and cognizant of we have just almost 20 minutes left. This is the item to continue our discussion on reserves. I will keep my comments very brief and just hit the highlights so we can make sure we have some ample time for discussion here, because I really want to hear from the board on this. So as you may recall, that part of our work plan for this year is to review reserves and take steps to discuss potential options to modify either the existing or move to a new reserve structure. Last meeting, we had a discussion, kind of gave you some history and overview of how we've arrived at our current juncture with regard to the meter reserves and what they're being used for and what they're doing. You've gotten the update from Elias that unfortunately our meter revenue was bleak for the year, and therefore there is no money for the reserves at this juncture, but we need to continue this discussion. So when we do have revenue, we know what we're going to do with it, where we're going to put it, and how we're going to use it. So what you have before you in this memo is two basic options that have a lot of considerations and potential to give us some flexibility on how we structure and move forward with net meter revenues. We're going to focus the conversation on the existing meter reserve setup and potential modifications we could make, enhancements to that. And then a new proposed, which we are calling micro reserves, which would divide up into the various meter areas, individual or very small reserves for each of those areas to do with specific projects back into those meter areas. So very quickly, the existing parking meter district area reserve is currently structured to pool portions of the net revenues from both the downtown core and all the exterior areas. So all the money gets put into one large pot. This is beneficial because there's a larger amount of revenue that's then available to disseminate for projects. Can potentially have more meaningful projects because there's more money available. It's a larger accumulation of those funds, and therefore more substantial investment could be made in the various meter district areas. In addition, it's important to note that the current reserve is being managed and is handled administratively by parking staff, and we have that capability. There's always the potential that if we make changes to this reserve, depending on what that additional workload might be on staff, we might not be able to cover it with existing staff. So it's just something we need to be mindful of as we're having these discussions and moving forward. Major changes that could burden administratively could make things more complicated for us. So what we've talked about internally is for potentials to modify the existing reserve could be things to better understand and offer more transparency into the reserve. We would suggest maybe outlining and identifying what the specific meter reserve should be spent on, and then identifying specific guidelines for project types and scopes and eligibility, and then outline a specific process for recommending, identifying, reviewing, and prioritizing those projects. So better understanding okay, here's the money, it's our setup in the reserves right now, but how are we going to use it? What are we going to use it for? And what is that process? Better defining that would be an improvement to our existing. Also would like to throw out for consideration, maybe a change to how we calculate what money goes into the reserve. As you can see from that chart that Elias had presented earlier, it's a little bit confusing. It's not overly straightforward on how we calculate currently. We are proposing a potential to consider just a straight kind of percentage allocation. After basic expenses are met and there's gross revenue or there's net revenues, having a percentage split between city parking fund and the reserve could be a cleaner option. Keeping in mind, as we kind of have these discussions, that funds should always be sent for public benefit. And then we're using the funds hopefully for city managed parking, transportation, multimodal investments within these meter district areas. So possible uses of funds could be to prioritize and support improvements in the pedestrian environment, things like trees, park benches, art installations, also to enhance pedestrian and bicycle circulation and safety within each district. And then we need to kind of consider, should the funds be used to offset or pay for expenses that are the responsibility currently of private property or business owners? If the fund ends up like we are now, kind of in this situation that we're in the red or there's a loss, these reserves, we need to keep in mind, they would remain eligible at the discretion of city council as an option to cover operating expenses of the entire parking system. So we need to keep that in mind, that I never thought this day would come where the parking fund would be operating in the red, but we're there now. So we need to consider that as well when we're having this discussion. And then if the potential that meter revenues in a given fiscal year are not sufficient enough to ensure the historical base revenue, that is if we stayed with our current allocation of funds and didn't move to a percentage base, if we can't meet those target historical base revenues, should the parking fund be made whole moving forward? So do we chisel away at that kind of red ink year after year before, and then hit a zero and then start accumulating money in the reserves? Again, things to consider. Additional points, we kind of I went over this a little bit, that the current kind of pooling of reserve allows for larger combined resources. Moving to a fixed percentage would give the fund some, it would automatically adapt it based on the revenue. So it would go up in years where revenue was stronger, and it would reduce when revenues weren't quite as strong, kind of giving us this built-in flexibility and a reaction to the market, which would be beneficial, I think. And again, wanting to develop kind of more substantial guidelines on how the reserves are operating. So that's kind of our proposal, or in a nutshell, our option for keeping the reserve, but as it is, but adding modifications. So this is, I'll move on real quickly to the multiple individual or micro reserves. So all of those items we kind of just mentioned would probably feed into the micro reserves as well. It would, however, change the structure. So we'd have multiple mini reserves, micro reserves, as opposed to one pooling reserve. So the specific money made in each individual district area, so from that chart that Elias had shown you, would flow into these individual reserves. That money then would be potentially available for each of those meter district areas to decide what it would be spent on in their specific area. Again, we could do a base percentage of, X amount of money was net in that area, and the city and the reserve will split, I don't know, 80-20 or 50-50, some percentage split. And then again, what would we use those reserves? If we establish micro reserves, how would we then establish the guidelines for what projects would happen, and how would those get reviewed? How would those get suggested? How would those move through the board and the approval process? We would need to outline that, as I mentioned earlier. Same sort of questions around who gets paid first and what gets made whole before money goes into those reserves. With the micro reserves, it's going to be quite a bit smaller pots of money. And the question then comes into play, if there is a specific area that doesn't necessarily make enough money to cover its expenses and doesn't therefore get money put into the reserves, how do we deal with that? If it is maybe in a one-year situation where one year they had a bad year, or if it's ongoing, there may not be money available for every district to have a fund. So the micro reserves do allow for the specific revenues that are generated in that area to go directly back into investments in that area. There wouldn't be a need to potentially wait for your turn in the rotation to get a project like there might be in the pooled situation. But again, smaller amounts of money would be available. You could accumulate over several years if you had a large project in a certain district that you wanted to do. That would be feasible, but again, your opportunities may be limited with micro reserves. One other important note is setting up micro reserves could, in the future, impact if we need or have a need to change meter boundaries based on changes that happen and occur in the downtown. Construction takes out meters, bike lanes takes out meters, driveways move, freight loadings, things move around. And so meters do as well occasionally. And so that may change and may cause some challenges if we establish micro meters. In general, also should be cognizant that parking funds are used to support a variety of citywide programs and services, and therefore it's crucial to ensure that the overall stability and sustainability of the parking fund is considered along with the status of the entire on and off street portfolio. So parking fund has to be substantially stable before these reserves can flourish. So I'm going to stop right there and open it up to have discussion and feedback. And if anybody has any questions specifically, I kind of ran through these pretty quickly. I'm going to stop sharing so I can see everybody.
Oh, one of the things that I appreciate about the micro reserve concept is that geographically, you know, Japantown, Old Civic Center, SOFA, and East Santa Clara meter districts are so different. You know, they're geographically different. They're different in terms of what they service, whether it's a retail district, office district. You know, I think giving these areas their own way of stipulating how they want to use their funds is important, you know, because I know that our needs in Japantown are probably a lot different than those of the Old Civic Center. And perhaps, you know, the allocation at Old Civic Center can be used to assist the micro houses and the homeless issues they're dealing with over there versus, you know, I know that East Santa Clara business district has reached out to me and they need help with marketing, you know, and so if their allocation is used specifically for something, I think being able to tailor the micro reserves per district would be, in my opinion, for us, it would be helpful.
Very good. Is there anything else that we need to cover on this one?
So I think we would like to have the board weigh in on kind of which direction you would like us to pursue, because our next meeting, we want to be able to, so these kind of talking points that were proposed today, they've not been vetted. And there's a lot of work that needs to go on behind the scenes with making sure that some of the things that we've put in here are completely feasible, legal, purchase. I mean, all the gamuts of the different areas of city process we need to check in with. So what we'd like the board to weigh in on is, are you wanting us to pursue the kind of changes or potential modifications to the current reserve and the pooled reserve, or would you like us to pursue and flesh out the micro reserve option? So we can frame our next presentation to you and have those internal city chats.
Board, where do you want to go?
I'd like to explore the micro reserves.
Sorry, I was on mute. I also agree with Tamiko. I would like to explore the same road.
Okay. Heather, does that give you the guidance that you're looking for?
Yeah, is this a discussion item only, Arian? We don't need to take an action on it? Okay.
No,
okay.
Just an update.
So we will move down that pipeline. Doesn't mean we can't, you know, make a U-turn at some point, but that it will frame our next presentation to you, and we will kind of get into more nuance and detail and kind of talk through for our next meeting. Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
In the last couple of minutes of the meeting, we can briefly touch on item 6C. There was a letter submitted to the Councilmember Peralez's office just before the September meeting, so we couldn't agendize it. I think it was circulated within the board members. A request from the SOFA committee within the Downtown Association to activate the convention center garage to allow for 90 minutes of free parking. We looked at that. We are not in support of that as a department and division. I've talked to the convention center and Team San Jose. They are also not supportive of that. The garage needs to be preserved for event parking, for the convention center, for the area theaters. Although it does provide some area parking, it is not intended as a primary destination. We have the second in San Carlos garage, which services that area and also provides the 90-minute of free parking. So wanted to touch on that and get any comments from the board.
Well, I can say I agree with that.
Any other?
I always
comments?
agree with Henry.
That's the easiest path, yes. All right, 7A.
I don't have any updates or information for 7A. I think that's a placeholder more than anything. Work does continue. Folks are continuing to work on land acquisition and conceptual designs for the two sites, the Lot E and the Milligan site. There's a lot of work that still needs to happen to bring those sites online as parking sites. I'll certainly keep the board apprised as the city makes more headway on that. Downtown promotions and marketing. I don't know. I can't see my screen does not show anything in terms of this Zoom meeting, so I'm not sure who's still around. I know the Downtown Association continues to provide marketing services for downtown. Christmas in the Park is returning to downtown this year, so that'll be big. My team is working on the plans around just kind of traffic and holiday activities. Hopefully it gets busy downtown. With the shark season starting, we have not seen the activity that we've seen in years past. Driven to the Market Street garage area just from that one thing, but hopefully with Christmas in the Park and some of the other theaters getting more active, we can see some more activity there.
Very good. I've been waiting for the public art item that I never saw on the agenda that Paul wanted to comment on, but it doesn't appear that Paul is still with us. So just for the record, since this is being recorded, I wanted to give Paul the chance to speak on the public art component he was wanting to speak on. So does anybody see that I'm missing it?
No, and there's no agenda item for that.
Okay. All right.
I think there's an agenda item, but I think there was a line item in one of the spreadsheets that referred to it. And I think he wanted to ask what that was. It was like one of the financial spreadsheets, if I recall.
Yeah, that was my impression as well, was about a line item.
Okay. Yeah, it's an expenditure by the city's public art Office of Cultural Affairs for every project that the city undertakes in the capital side, so long as it's a large enough and a permanent capital improvement project. If we're going to replace a camera or a pay station or restripe, that doesn't rise to the level of a true new infrastructure project. Anything that does gets tapped with a small public art component. So we, through our capital budget, we put public art monies there, and then that's tapped into the Office of Cultural Affairs to effectuate public art throughout the city, not just necessarily downtown.
Right. Was it like an obscene amount of money? I mean, I don't understand.
It's $60,000 out of 13 million.
Okay, so that's a fairly small amount of money, although 60,000 is 60,000, but okay. I was curious myself why he was so adamant about speaking about that.
Dan, Dan, I can provide some feedback. Paul Soto attends every city council meeting and speaks on every subject. He's a regular.
Good deal. Well, that's what makes a democracy, right?
There you go.
Thank you. I appreciate
All
it.
right. Anything else for the good of the board?
Nope. Adjourn the meeting 12:03.
All right, well done, team.
Well
Thank you
done.
very much.
Thank you.